Hare Krishna. So today is the day of celebration here. Actually, we have something to celebrate. We're going to complete the Bhagavad Gita portion of the ISKCON DC Bhakti Shastri course. We've got verses 61 through 78, and according to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, it's verses 65 through 72, 64 through 72 maybe, are the essence of the whole Bhagavad Gita. So we're going to get today we're going to cover the essence of it. We've discussed many different things within all the various chapters, different types of knowledge, different types of yogas. And here everything is going to be summed up, and only the very essence of what is to be taken away is going to be covered here in that group of verses. There's kind of a little afterword after that, 73 through 78, and there's a few verses that are going to precede it that we didn't cover, but a large part of what we're going to do today is sum up the essence of Bhagavad Gita. So we can begin with 61. And we were picking up where Krishna was advising Arjuna to act and to fight, and he says, if you don't, he said in the previous verse, that you will be forced to act, by your own nature. We talked about how everybody has a certain innate propensities and proclivities and such things. And that it comes with us, from our past lives, a certain combination of the modes of material nature, as we talked about, and we tend, if we don't take up some kind of spiritual discipline, if we don't at least follow the Vedas, we're simply left acting on that level. And so Krishna says, he says that if you don't act now. He was a warrior. If you don't fight now, which is according to your nature and according to your dharma here, you're going to do it later on. That's your nature to do so. So here he picks up from there and he says, the Supreme Lord, this is 1861, the Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart, O Arjuna, and is directing the wanderings of all living entities who are seated as on a machine made of the material energy. Yantra Rudhani, it's a machine made up of Maya. And Srila Prabhupada says in his purport, he says, Arjuna was not the supreme knower, and his decision to fight or not to fight was confined to his limited discretion. Lord Krishna instructed that the individual is not all in all. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, or he himself, Krishna, as the localized supersoul, sits in the heart, directing the living being. And Prabhupada says, after changing bodies, the living entity forgets his past deeds, but the supersoul, as the knower of the past, present, and future, remains the witness of all his activities. Therefore, all the activities of living entities are directed by this supersoul. So it's that we forget our past lives when we take birth, but what the Lord remembers what our purposes are and objectives are, and reminds us. We heard that verse in the 15th chapter. He's in charge of remembrance, forgetfulness, and knowledge. And then he goes on to say in the purport, he says, a person seated in a high-speed motor car goes faster than one seated in a slower car. So different bodies, right? Though the living entities, the drivers, may be the same. Similarly, by the order of the Supreme Soul, material nature fashions a particular type of body to a particular type of living entity, so that he may work according to his past desires. So he gives them the proper vehicle to act in. So there's a continuity between lifetimes in that way. And then Prabhupada says, one should not think himself independent of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The individual is always under the Lord's control. Therefore, one's duty is surrender, and that is the injunction of the next verse. Well, that's coming up. And along with, I thought it was very similar when Prabhupada mentions in the beginning that Arjuna was not the supreme knower, and that we're not independent. He says, says all the activities of the living entities are directed by the super soul. Baladev Vidyabhushan, he says that Krishna was concerned that Arjuna was still thinking that he was the knower and the doer. And I guess that, of course, applies to us. I guess maybe we need to be reminded of this at least one more time. We've covered this a few times in Bhagavad Gita, that we can't act independently. And that largely the soul who has to sign off on every action. The soul is mentioned as one of the factors of action. But when we are under illusion and when we are not in a very good consciousness, we tend simply to sign off on whatever the mind or the senses, the body wants, and we just kind of rubber stamp it. And so, in that sense, Krishna was telling Arjuna that that he if he doesn't take advantage of superior direction that he's giving him, he's the super soul. Krishna already said, "I am the super soul in the heart," and he's told Arjuna, "You should fight." If he doesn't take advantage of that higher direction, then he's going to simply follow the kind of understanding and logic that's dictated by. We already saw how people's understanding depends upon their modes of material nature. That people in certain modes have a certain type of understanding. And so he will depend upon that. And as a soul, he will most likely just sign off on that. And so it was described how if people are simply left to function according to the dictates of their nature, it tends to lead to a downward spiral. We generally don't make good decisions. And so here he said that Baladeva Vidyabhushan says that Krishna is concerned that Arjuna is in that situation, that he's trusting his own understanding too much. Thinks he has some kind of independent understanding, when really it's just being dictated by his nature. We think that we have good understanding. We trust our own minds and things like that. But and we think that we're doing it. We have knowledge. Our knowledge is better than other people's knowledge. We understand everybody else doesn't understand. We think those kind of things. When really, it's something that's dictated by a long kind of process of many lifetimes. We have a certain attitude and understanding and nature, and that dictates that. It feels like we're just doing it and coming up with it now, but anybody who knows can see where we're at regarding the modes of material nature, can predict the kind of understanding we'll have. They go together. So here it's Krishna is worried about that, and so he's saying, look, again, you can't even do anything independently. None of your actions, we can decide, but all of the actions and all of the equipment that we have with which to act is dependent upon higher powers. Here Krishna is getting right down to the nitty-gritty and saying it's him as the super soul. Otherwise we say the devatas who control different features of material nature, that they also direct it. But everything in the material world is directed by the super soul. There's a passage in the Srimad Bhagavatam where all of the whole universe is kind of conceived of as a gigantic organism, and all the different the other entities and elements were entering into it and taking up their respective places, but it wouldn't work. Says the Virat Purusha wouldn't get up. It wasn't showing any signs of life, and it wasn't until the super soul enters into it that it animates. So ultimately, you have to trace it back. Any action within this world traces back to the super soul. And so here Krishna is concerned that Arjuna is thinking too highly of his own understanding and taking credit for his actions. So again, he's reminding, no, that's, you can't do those things independently. Okay, so that we'll go on to the next verse follows from this. 62, O scion of Bharat, that's Arjuna, surrender unto him utterly, the super soul. By his grace you will attain transcendental peace and the supreme and eternal abode. Okay, so we've seen already that if you just act in accordance with your nature, that the result isn't very good. Generally, he says you do not follow the Vedic injunctions. You follow your own mind and senses, and you move downward in the universe, downward into lower species of life. And it was mentioned very clearly that only by following the Vedic rules and regulations is there any chance of being stabilized and not going downwards and having the hope of moving upwards. So here he says, if you take a higher direction, if instead of depending upon your own understanding, you depend upon the Lord and take his instructions, then it says by his grace. The word here is tat prasadat, by his grace. And sharanam gacha, surrender, in all respects, sarva bhavana. That's why Prabhupada says utterly. Surrender unto him utterly. And then by his grace, tat prasada, his mercy, and then you achieve the param, the transcendental peace, and sthanam, the position of transcendental peace, which Prabhupada says is the supreme and eternal abode. So the results are quite different if you do that. And so he's reminding Arjuna of that fact. If you want to do the right, if you really want the best result, give it up. Stop listening to your mind. Stop listening to your, power of reason and understanding. Listen to mine. So, in the purport, Prabhupada says, a living entity should therefore surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is situated in everyone's heart, and that will relieve him from all kinds of miseries of this material existence. By such surrender, not only will one be released from all miseries in this life, but at the end he will reach the Supreme God. And Prabhupada says, since all of creation is the kingdom of God. This is an interesting thing what Prabhupada says here. He says this on different occasions. And I mention this because, so many times we hear the difference between matter and spirit, and we need to know the difference between the two. But here Prabhupada says, since all of creation is the kingdom of God, everything material is actually spiritual. He says, but Paramam Padam specifically refers to the eternal abode, which is called the spiritual sky, or Vaikuntha. Because we heard, that the material nature, Krishna calls it his bina prakriti, his separated potency, but he claims it as his. And so Prabhupada says, since Krishna is the Supreme Spirit, all of his energies should be considered to be divine or spiritual. When my spiritual master was a new devotee, he was on a morning walk with Srila Prabhupada, who was saying something similar to this, that ultimately everything is spiritual. And he asked him a question. So he said, Srila Prabhupada, I'm trying to understand the difference between the body and the soul and matter and spirit. And now you're saying that ultimately everything is spiritual. How can I understand that? And Prabhupada said there was different kinds of spirit. And that's how you look at it. So here he's distinguishing between different kinds. He says that everything material is actually spiritual, but here Paramam Padam specifically refers to the eternal abode, which is called the spiritual sky, or Vaikuntha, the internal potency, rather than the external potency. But they're all God's energy. And Krishna was revealing that in order that we may not forget Krishna, not forget God even in ordinary life. We should be seeing all things as his energy. He's the owner, the proprietor, the creator. That puts us in the right mood for devotion. And that was Krishna mentioned that in chapter 7, the world is made up of his 8 separated potencies. And everything was either his spiritual or material energy. And then Prabhupada mentions in his purport, he says, in the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, it is stated, Sarvasya chaham hridisana vishtaho. The Lord is seated in everyone's heart. So this recommendation that one should surrender unto the Supersoul sitting within means that one should surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. So here he's saying that Krishna is already, he mentioned that the Supersoul is one of his expansions. So we don't have to worry so much, if we're Krishna Bhaktas, we don't have to worry so much about dealing with the super soul per se. We can consider Krishna to be also the super soul. We can direct everything. We don't have to kind of separate. So now I'm going to listen to Krishna. Now I'm going to listen to the super soul. Actually, it says for advanced devotees, Krishna enters the heart personally. But otherwise, he says we just surrender to this. If we surrender to Krishna, we're following this advice of surrendering to the super soul automatically. And then 1863 and Krishna says now he says now he kind of sums things up here, and he says, okay, thus I have explained to you knowledge still more confidential. Deliberate on this fully, and then do what you wish to do. So a key element of our philosophy is that the individual souls have a level of freedom. You can't have relationship without freedom. If there's if you're forced to act in a certain way, then it's slavery, or it's just an apparent relationship. If somebody has a gun to your head and has you serve them or pretend to love them, if somehow somebody is can hypnotize you or something and control your mind, it's not a genuine relationship. So bhakti is all about relationship, and that the Supreme Lord, who in one sense is everything. We're gonna hear this at the end of the class. Prabhupada talks about this simultaneous oneness and difference philosophy. That Krishna is everything, but he wants to have genuine relationship. So part of his creation, part of his expansions are entities like us. And he gives them, and even though he's the supreme controller, he gives them intrinsically a level of freedom of choice. Do we want to serve or not? We can make that, we make that choice. And that makes it genuine, makes the relationship genuine. Do what you wish to do, he says. Prabhupada says here in the purport, he says, the Lord has already explained to Arjuna the knowledge of Brahmabhuta. This we'd covered last time, Brahmabhuta prasanatma, shochina kangshati, samasaveshu bhuteshu mad bhaktim lavate param, how the yoga ladder was leading to bhakti. One who is in the Brahmabhuta condition is joyful. He never laments, nor does he desire anything. That is due to confidential knowledge. Krishna also discusses knowledge of the Supersoul. This is also Brahman knowledge of Brahman, but it is superior. So when we reach the level of personality, when we look at the Supreme, we have the impersonal. We've talked about this so many times through the Bhakti Shastri course. You have the impersonal that's spread everywhere, and many people think that that's the most cosmic thing. But Krishna, in his actual form, is the source of that. He already has mentioned that in Bhagavad Gita. And his form is the most important thing, because that's where he is able to engage in relationship. Just oneness is boring. That's just this is what Krishna decides. He can do anything he wants. He can be just impersonal if he wants. But that's boring. He wants relationship, and therefore there has to be diversity. And so in his personal form, that's where he engages in to the highest extent in relationship. That's the highest thing. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati calls his form concentrated Brahman. I think it's a way that people who are thinking that the Brahman effulgence is higher can kind of grasp it. If you concentrate it, then you get Krishna's form. Because it says it's just the light from his body. And then Prabhupada says, hear the words, Yate chasi tata kuru, as you like, you may act, indicate that God does not interfere with the little independence of the living entity. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord has explained in all respects how one can elevate his living condition. The best advice imparted to Arjuna is to surrender unto the super soul seated within his heart. And Prabhupada already explained that can just mean Krishna. And then Prabhupada says, before surrendering, one is free to deliberate on this. This is interesting. Is free to deliberate on this subject as far as the intelligence goes. That is the best way to accept the instruction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Such instruction comes also through the spiritual master, the bona fide representative of Krishna. So it's interesting. Before surrendering, one is free to deliberate on this subject as far as the intelligence goes. We're not supposed to just blindly surrender. Right? Sometimes religion and spirituality is they call it belief systems. Here it is. Here's all the things that you have to believe to enter into the door and to be accepted, and you just believe it. And if there are doubts, if you're not convinced, by force of will you believe it anyway, and that leads to fanaticism. This is what Prabhupada calls religion without philosophy. It's simply it's fanaticism, he says, and people become fanatical because they have doubts, but they're supposed to suppress them because otherwise you're not holy. So he says you should think about these things. You should use your intelligence. You should. You can. He says before you can ask questions. You can try to deal with your doubts. So it's interesting. Not just believe, here it is, here's the absolute truth. We believe it is the absolute truth that Krishna has here. But it's not that you put it in front of your face and you just believe every word. Faith is something that is a process that develops. And as we progress in our Krishna consciousness, our faith becomes increased. We have more experience, and we see that maybe some things that were difficult to understand become clearer as time goes on. And Prabhupada says, surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead is in the best interest of the living entities. It is not for the interest of the Supreme. This is also an interesting little, it's some quick little sentence, and you could pass over it pretty quickly. And I almost did the first time I read through the purport. And that's really interesting. It is in the best interest of the living entity. It is not for the interest of the Supreme. That indicates that Krishna is complete. He doesn't need us in any particular way. So he's not asking us to surrender because he needs us, and therefore whatever he's a needy person, and he wants to exploit us in some way. But he says actually it's for our interest. Krishna is okay. He's got plenty. He has everything he needs. He has so many devotees. Of course, he feels everyone is important to him. And he feels like he wants to have everybody. But it's not a position of neediness. So it's not as though that Krishna is, if somebody is in a powerful position and can control over people, they control people, well, sometimes just for their own fun, I guess. But otherwise they do it because they can get something out of them. I need you to cooperate with me so it can do something good for me. Right? So it's in that way, it's kind of a one-sided relationship. But here, Prabhupada is saying that Krishna doesn't really need us. He's not trying to exploit us for something. He's not trying to use us for some purpose. He just wants to have a relationship with us, which will be great for us. So you can, otherwise, we have that fear. If there's a supremely powerful entity, and we're supposed to surrender, doesn't that mean that it gives rise to notions of tyranny and exploitation and such things? And that just isn't there with Krishna. He just has love. Okay, so now we're coming into we got some of the prelude there, and now we're going to come into the, it looks like starting from the next verse. This is introducing it here. The essence of the whole Bhagavad Gita. Here's introducing it. Krishna says, because you are my very dear friend. What does he say? How does he put it? Ishta asi, you are dear to me. Ishta asi me. You're very, very dear to me. He says, I'm giving you the sarva guhya tamam, the most confidential of all. So because you are my very dear friend, I am speaking to you my supreme instruction, the most confidential knowledge of all. Hear this from me, for it is for your benefit. Okay, so here it comes. And Srila Prabhupada says, the Lord has given Arjuna knowledge that is confidential, knowledge of Brahman, and still more confidential, knowledge of the Supersoul within everyone's heart. And now he is giving the most confidential part of knowledge. Just surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Can you go to the slide before? Just I want to see.
Okay, at the end of the 9th chapter, he has said, Man manaha, just always think of me. The same instruction is repeated here to stress the essence of the teachings of Bhagavad Gita. He's anticipating the next verse that Krishna is going to speak. He says, the same instruction is repeated here to stress the essence of the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. The next 2 verses are going to be the big highlight. And what Krishna is saying in this connection is the most essential part of knowledge, and it should be carried out not only by Arjuna, but by all living entities. So he says, just in case you've forgotten, the Bhagavad Gita is not just for Arjuna, and not just for his specific problem, but it is there for all of us. And then Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur, his commentary, he puts these words in Krishna's mouth. He says, this is what Krishna is saying to him. O my dear friend Arjuna, I will now speak the essence of the whole scripture in 8 verses. Forget about the difficulties in having to review everything in order to understand it. Okay? So, there you go. All the other things just support this. This is what it all comes down to. If you know these next verses, you know it. You know the essence of it. So we should pay attention here. If we haven't before, we should start. A good time to start. And then here's where Krishna is repeating very much what he said in the 9th chapter, practically verbatim. Always think of me, Matmana, become my devotee, Madbhakta, worship me, Madhyaji, and offer your homage unto me, Namaskuru. Thus you will come to me without fail. I promise you this, because you are my very dear friend. Prabhupada is he's gonna say, what does he say here about the very dear friend part? He says, Prabhupada says, anyone who follows the path of Arjuna can become a dear friend to Krishna and obtain the same perfection as Krishna, which is very sweet. I think it's Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur. He says that a sense of what Krishna is saying there says, I wouldn't lie to you. You can trust me. You're my friend. I wouldn't tell you something that's wrong. But this is beautiful. What Prabhupada says that the promise is not just for Arjuna. That the promise also holds for us, because anyone who follows the path of Arjuna can become a dear friend to Krishna and obtain the same perfection. And Prabhupada says before that, he says, the most confidential part of knowledge is that one should become a pure devotee of Krishna and always think of him and act for him. See, it's interesting. To me, the act for him comes from Namaskuru, offering homages, offering your obeisances and homages. It doesn't mean just bowing down, right? But it means doing what you're supposed to do. Homage, you do homage to somebody or obeisances. It doesn't just mean, just offering obeisances. It doesn't just mean bowing down. Not namaskuru doesn't mean just that, but it means you should act for him. Because the verse doesn't say anything precisely about acting. It just says, offer your. He says homage in the smooth translation, but it says become my. Oh, also becoming my devotee means you're going to act also. Right? If you're the devotee of him, you're going to do something to show your devotion. Thinking of him is one thing, of course, and also worshiping madhyaji and offering obeisance. Worship is also the form of worship is also service. So all this is many different things that imply that we should do active service. Actually, all those things kind of work. Becoming the devotee, worshiping, and offering obeisances are all things that can imply acting in service. So it's actually nice that Prabhupada brings that out very clearly. We might think otherwise, as more of a passive thing. One should always act in such a way that all his daily activities are in connection with Krishna. So Prabhupada is going to give some really practical, in these purports he gives these really, really practical things. We have, right here, especially in this part, Prabhupada really shines for us. And we've talked about, in different other parts of the Gita, we've used some of the commentaries of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Baladev Vidyabhushan. But here, when we're talking about just the straight-up devotion in particular, Srila Prabhupada is our contemporary. And the one thing the acharyas do is they present the teachings in a way that's most practical for that time and place. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has mentioned that we have that there are so many examples of devotion throughout history, but the ones that are kind of more contemporary are the ones that we can follow the most closely because they're adapted for our particular time and place. And so Prabhupada gives us these beautiful instructions here, all through the Bhagavad Gita, but here his advice is the most relevant from more than anybody else. So we really hold fast to him here. One should always act in such a way that all his daily activities are in connection with Krishna. He should arrange his life in such a way that throughout the 24 hours he cannot but think of Krishna. And he says, and the Lord's promise is that anyone who is in such pure Krishna consciousness will certainly return to the abode of Krishna, where he will be engaged in the association of Krishna face to face. That's implied in the verse, but when Prabhupada makes it so explicit like that, isn't it beautiful? He says, you will come to me. And what does that mean? Prabhupada says face to face. This is so beautiful. How do we not get excited and enthused by this? This is, that this possibility is there for us. How can we not be? It's just our conditioning and illusion. How can we can't be so joyful and jubilant that we have this possibility? That we can become, as I said, friends like Arjuna and become dear to the Lord. We already are dear to him. And we can come face to face with him. What an opportunity. Before we had any understanding of spiritual life, imagine what our greatest dreams were. How do they match up to that? They just don't come even close. We should be just jubilant. It's our own misfortune that we're not so much. This is the second verse of Lord Chaitanya Shikshastakam. Durdaiva Midrisha Mahajanina. I don't have attachment for the chanting or attachment for devotion. Why shouldn't we? And then Prabhupada says, and here's even more beautiful, these words stress that one should concentrate his mind upon Krishna, the very form with two hands carrying a flute, the bluish boy with a beautiful face and peacock feathers in his hair. When he says, Manmana, think of me, he says that's what he means. And he says the Lord has multi-forms, such as Vishnu, Narayana, Rama, Varaha, etc. But a devotee should concentrate his mind on the form that was present before Arjuna. He says when Krishna says me, he's talking about me in that moment. It's beautiful. Then 1866. This is usually we say is the conclusion of Bhagavad Gita. Although the 1865 also shows us what we should do. The famous verse that almost everybody who, if you hang anywhere near an ISKCON temple, you will hear so many times. Sarva dharman parityaja mamekam sharanam vrajaham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshayashami ma shuchaha. Abandon all varieties of religion, sarva dharman, all dharmas, and just surrender unto me. It says sarva dharman parityaja, renouncing all those, abandoning them, forget about those, and then to me only sharanam, surrender. So just surrender unto me. And in the word for word is ekam, only. Surrender only to me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions. Aham, I, tvam, you, sarva, all, papebhya, from sinful reactions, mokshayashami, will deliver you. He says, ma, do not, shuchaha, don't worry about that. Don't fear. Because Arjuna was having that fear of committing sinful activities by participating in the battle. So he said, look, everything else that you've heard throughout this whole Bhagavad Gita, any place else you might hear, any place else, disregard that. And you just take this essence, which was also described in the previous verse. You just surrender to me, forget about all the different types of yogas we talked about, forget all these different kinds of pathways, forget all, and you just do that. And he says, you're set. That's the, we always say that's the essence of Bhagavad Gita. And Prabhupada says in the purport, and we will look a lot of this purport here because this is a really concentrated and, as you'd expect, wonderful purport. The Lord has described various kinds of knowledge and processes of religion. Knowledge of the Supreme Brahman, knowledge of the Supersoul, knowledge of the different types of orders and statuses of social life, knowledge of the renounced order of life, knowledge of non-attachment, sense and mind control, meditation, etc. He has described in so many ways different types of religion. He says, now in summarizing Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that Arjuna should give up all the processes that have been explained to him. He should simply surrender to Krishna. That surrender will save him from all kinds of sinful reactions, for the Lord personally promises to protect him. So this is here. The essence of Bhagavad Gita is pure devotion. And we started the Bhakti Shastri with the Nectar of Instruction, which talked about also, gave a quick summary of pure devotion. Although you can say that everything is in that book, written by Rupa Goswami. And then we're finding out here the conclusion of the Bhagavad Gita is pure devotion. And then we're going to take up next week, the first 19 chapters of the Nectar of Devotion, also written by Rupa Goswami, that discusses in some detail the process of pure devotion that Krishna is giving in Bhagavad Gita. And it will give further explanation about why this is true, why you can give up all these other processes. And just start there, and everything else comes. Then Prabhupada says, in the 7th chapter it was said that only one who has become free from all sinful reactions can take to the worship of Lord Krishna. He said, in this life and last life. If we've done pious activities in previous lives and in this life, and is free from sinful reactions, can become a Dhritavrat, somebody who can take up the worship of Krishna with some determination. Thus one may think that unless he is free from all sinful reactions, he cannot take to the surrendering process. To such doubts it is here said that even if one is not free from all sinful reactions, simply by the process of surrendering to Sri Krishna, he is automatically freed. So this is just on the surface, Krishna is saying that, to Arjuna, that he can participate in the fight and shouldn't worry about any sinful reaction. Here Prabhupada says it's really going deeper, and this we'll also discover in the Nectar of Devotion, how pure bhakti sprouts in an unclean place. There are no prerequisites involved. That when the process of pure bhakti begins, it gives you the qualification to do it. It's like a remedial type of process. That you have no qualification, but if somehow you decide to surrender to Krishna and to serve him, all the things you need will manifest out of that process of bhakti. Every other dharma takes some qualification. That whole yoga ladder, he has to go step by step by step. You basically have to be have a pretty strong, you have to be able to act in the mode of goodness in order to start that karma yoga. You have to be able to do that for a good long time before you're qualified for jnana, and then afterwards you have to advance in that to become qualified for the meditational yoga. So all these prerequisites are there. You have to be able to act. It's not easy to do your duty not thinking of the results. We all do things for motivation. And so when Krishna told Arjuna to do that was not an easy thing to do. Not everybody can do that. That's why people perform pious activities for the results. That's why the Vedas promise good karma from doing good deeds, because people generally do things out of motivation. So at least you do the right thing. But to take that next step, to move towards transcendence, you have to do it without wanting the results. That's not easy to do. Most people can't get that far. Krishna says otherwise they can. In 18th chapter, he made it a little bit easier, and he said, you think that you're doing it for my pleasure, or Prabhupada says you give some of the results of your activities to Krishna, and that can start that path. But with devotion, pure devotion, it doesn't take anything except that saying, I'm going to surrender, I want to serve you. And everything else can come. All the negative things can be removed, and all the good qualities can be instilled. That's how it works. It's self-sufficient. That's why it says that it's defined as not wanting something, having an ulterior motive, doing it for some other purpose, just that you want to serve Krishna so that you can serve him more, and you don't take shelter of any other process. You don't feel any of these other processes are required. You're depending simply, as he says, that Krishna automatically helps him. He says that if one is not free from all sinful reactions, simply by the process of surrendering to Sri Krishna, he is automatically freed. That Krishna can help him. Krishna will help him in all ways. Yeah, the Lord personally promises to protect him. The Lord personally becomes our personal protector. We already heard how he gives us intelligence, and how he enters the heart with the shining lamp of knowledge. He becomes active in the process. So if you have Krishna on your side helping you, what's the problem? Prabhupada says, and then here's what Prabhupada says, he follows up with that, right? One should be confident that in all circumstances, Krishna will protect him from all difficulties. There is no need of thinking how one should keep the body and soul together. Krishna will see to that. He mentioned that already in the 9th chapter. Carry to you what you lack and preserve what you have. One should always think himself helpless and should consider Krishna the only basis for his progress in life. It doesn't mean helpless doesn't mean passive. Helpless means that we don't, again, it's similar to what Krishna's been saying, we don't think ourselves the independent doer. We want to serve Krishna, and we'll try our very best and work as hard as we can to do that. But we don't think that we're able to do it independently. Feel that only by Krishna's mercy we can really act. We try our hardest, but we don't take credit for it so much. And then Prabhupada continues. There are different processes of religion and purificatory processes by cultivation of knowledge, meditation in the mystic yoga system, Jnana Yoga and Dhyana Yoga, etc. But one who surrenders unto Krishna does not have to execute so many methods. That simple surrender unto Krishna will save him from unnecessarily wasting time. One can thus make all progress at once and be freed from all sinful reactions. Prabhupada sometimes uses that example. He says there's the different yogas, like the yoga ladder. He says instead of taking the ladder, you take the elevator. When you take bhakti, it takes you right to the top. And he says that the other processes he mentions in the purport. I don't think I excerpted that part here and quoted it, but he says that if you do take to any other processes and they do not lead to bhakti, then what is the use of them? They haven't done you any good. Their only purpose is to lead you upward towards bhakti. If you don't reach bhakti, and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that even a little bit of bhakti is necessary to make all these other yogas successful. But unless they take you to pretty serious bhakti, then the whole thing has failed. And here he says, if you take the bhakti, you get everything. This is why waste time. One who surrenders unto Krishna does not have to execute so many methods. The simple surrender unto Krishna will save him from unnecessarily wasting time. One can thus make all progress at once and be freed from all sinful reactions. Beautiful. And then Prabhupada, again, he comes back to the form of Krishna. One should be attracted by the beautiful vision of Krishna. Right? So, it's interesting. Surrender always sounds like a painful process. Right? In our experience in this world, surrender is never any fun. It means you're being conquered by an enemy. You finally give up. You can't do something. Oh, I just surrender. I can't. No one can resist. Either it's an enemy or a thing. You have a disease and you finally surrender and go to hospice, so you die. It's never good. Here Prabhupada is showing how it's beautiful. In this case, it's a different thing. One should be attracted by the beautiful vision of Krishna. His name is Krishna because he is all attractive. One who becomes attracted by the beautiful, all-powerful, omnipotent vision of Krishna is fortunate. So it's a beautiful process. Sometimes we do surrender. Actually, we surrender to love, even in the material world. Right? We say that we surrender. We can't resist any longer. So there are some seeming kind of positive ones, and this is that kind of thing. You surrender to the all attractiveness of Krishna. It's not a defeat, it's a victory. You have surrendered to this beautiful opportunity that you couldn't have imagined before. And then Prabhupada says, in other words, devotional service to Krishna in full consciousness is the most confidential part of knowledge, and this is the essence of the whole Bhagavad Gita. Karma yogis, empiric philosophers, mystics, and devotees are all called transcendentalists, but one who is a pure devotee is the best of all. So we've heard all these. We've heard those. This is in the first 6 chapters: Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Dhyana Yoga. Those are the 3 he's coming back to again. He says they're transcendentalists, but one who is a pure devotee is the best of all. And then he says, then Prabhupada talks about the do not fear part. He says that the particular words used here, ma shuchaha, don't fear, don't hesitate, don't worry. That's how he puts it, isn't it? Don't fear, don't hesitate, don't worry, are very significant. One may be perplexed as to how one can give up all kinds of religious forms and simply surrender unto Krishna. But such worry is useless. One may be perplexed as to how one can give up all kinds of religious forms and simply surrender to Krishna, but such worry is useless. Krishna's got your back.
And we don't do any religious forms also. So there is nothing to give up in our case.
Yeah, for us usually it's not. Most people in this day and age are coming from not such a pious background. And then 67, and then he explains how to use this knowledge, and how to take it, how to give it, these kinds of things. He says this confidential knowledge may never be explained to those who are not austere, without tapasya, atapaskaya, or devoted, abhaktaya, a bhakta, right? Without devotion, bhaktaya, was not, or engaged in devotional service, nor to one who is envious of me. Ashushushave is not engaged, and abhyasuyati is envious against Krishna in some way. Never be explained to those who are not austere, devoted, engaged in service, or envious. That's what he says. And Prabhupada says in the purport, persons who have not undergone the austerities of the religious process, who have never attempted devotional service in Krishna consciousness, who have not tended or served a pure devotee, and especially those who are conscious of Krishna only as a historical personality, or who are envious of the greatness of Krishna, should not be told this most confidential part of knowledge. And Vishwanath and Baladev said that envious also can be the types. Prabhupada's mentioned this before a lot too. The people who think that Krishna's body is just a material, like he says, a historical personality. He's just somehow he is a material. He's a material entity, or doesn't have a form. Actually, the purpose of Bhagavad Gita is not understandable to those who are sensuous. So those are the not austere. Even if one is not sensuous but is strictly following the disciplines enjoined in the Vedic scripture, if he is not a devotee, he also cannot understand Krishna. So Prabhupada's explaining why those different things are here. And even when one poses himself as a devotee of Krishna but is not engaged in Krishna conscious activities, he also cannot understand Krishna.
Poses himself.
Yeah. And then he says, it is, however, sometimes found that even demoniac persons who are envious of Krishna, worshipping Krishna in a different way, take to the profession of explaining Bhagavad Gita in a different way to make business. But anyone who desires actually to understand Krishna must avoid such commentaries on Bhagavad Gita. Now, Prabhupada changes the focus a little bit. That not only should such persons not be told the knowledge, but sometimes they speak the knowledge, and we shouldn't listen to those. They shouldn't be spoken to, and they shouldn't be heard from about the knowledge. And he changes the focus a little bit here. He says there are many persons who are envious of Krishna. Such persons should not be told of Bhagavad Gita, for they cannot understand. There is no possibility of a faithless person's understanding Bhagavad Gita and Krishna. Without understanding Krishna from the authority of a pure devotee, one should not try to comment upon Bhagavad Gita. So such a person shouldn't hear about, they shouldn't speak about, and if they do speak about, we shouldn't listen to them. He's going to mention this a few times because Prabhupada was presenting, he called it Bhagavad Gita as it is, because he thought there were so many, or we didn't think there were so many other commentaries that didn't catch the essence because of the reasons stated here. People couldn't understand it properly. And so he was translating and commenting on the Bhagavad Gita so that we could understand the essence. And he really focuses on that throughout the whole Gita. So he keeps making it clear here that you need to hear the Bhagavad Gita from somebody who truly understands it, has all these other characteristics. They're austere, they're devotees, they act in devotion, they're not envious of Krishna. And here he says, without understanding Krishna from the authority of a pure devotee. You mean also the line of disciplic succession. There's a question that kind of comes up when you hear this verse, and when you see what Prabhupada did, and what we do in Lord Chaitanya's movement. We go on the street and we distribute Bhagavad Gitas, or we have them for sale to people. We give, and Prabhupada says we have open classes, and so it seems that we don't carefully follow exactly what Krishna is saying here. So Prabhupada is going to address that a little bit later on. But I thought maybe that question might creep into your mind as you see that. That do we always check off all those boxes before we speak to people of Bhagavad Gita? We don't, and there's a reason for that.
And Prabhupada, one question can I ask?
Let's wait to the end. We'll carry. And then 68. For one who explains the supreme secret to the devotees, this Paramam Guhyam, Bhaktishu to the devotees, pure devotional service is guaranteed. Bhaktim, Param, Bhaktim Mai, devotional service to me, Param, is guaranteed. Without a doubt, it says, comes without a doubt. And at the end, he will come back to me. So, explained properly, right? He says that spreading this knowledge makes you very dear to Krishna. And actually, he's going to explain he's going to follow this up with the next verse, so that you become the most dear to him. So it's said that one should take some care about how one presents it. But presenting it is something that's a great service. Krishna spoke Bhagavad Gita so that the world could understand it. He said this. He told Arjuna that in course of time he'd spoken this knowledge before, but in the course of time the knowledge had been lost. And so one of the things he was doing here was speaking this knowledge for it to be available to the world. Then Prabhupada says, generally it is advised that Bhagavad Gita be discussed amongst the devotees only, for those who are not devotees will understand neither Krishna nor Bhagavad Gita. Those who do not accept Krishna as he is and Bhagavad Gita as it is should not try to explain Bhagavad Gita again whimsically and become offenders. So again, he looks on both sides of this issue. They shouldn't be talked about. The Bhagavad Gita shouldn't be talked about with them. And if somehow they've come across it, they really shouldn't speak. And if they do, we shouldn't listen. And then Prabhupada says, Bhagavad Gita should be explained to persons who are ready to accept Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is a subject matter for the devotees only and not for philosophical speculators. So again, he's repeating this. But then he says, anyone, however, who tries sincerely to present Bhagavad Gita as it is, will advance in devotional activities and reach the pure devotional state of life. As a result of such pure devotion, he is sure to go back home, back to Godhead. So one sincerely does it. So that's following with Krishna. So I also kind of read into this, because like I said, Prabhupada published the Bhagavad Gita. He wanted it to be spread far and wide. And so if somebody is trying to serve the Lord sincerely and trying to spread it, I think he even addresses it a little bit more later on. We're going to carry on with it a bit. But there's reasons why we don't follow that particular verse to the letter. And then he says, there is no servant in this world more dear to me than he, nor will there ever be one more dear. Prabhupada doesn't even give a commentary on that. It's just straightforward at face value. So that someone who spreads Bhagavad Gita, that's his status, or her status also. And 70, and I declare that he who studies this sacred conversation of ours worships me by his intelligence. The words in the verse are jnana, yogyena, by the sacrifice of knowledge. This is a sacrifice of knowledge. That's what he calls about by his intelligence. This is how he's translating jnana yogyena. That's how he worships him by his intelligence, jnana yogyena. It's a sacrifice of knowledge. That's my opinion. So, again, it's true knowledge, the highest knowledge, the essence of knowledge. And then in 71, he says, one who listens. So Krishna is saying now, so who you shouldn't speak it, who it shouldn't be spoken to, but if it's spoken to correctly, what it does, and then who should listen, and how you should listen, and who has the proper qualities, how they should do it. And one who listens with faith and without envy, Shraddhavan and Anasuya, faithful and not envious, becomes free from sinful reactions and attains to the auspicious planets where the pious dwell. And now here Prabhupada will explain. Here it means not necessarily people who even take up the process so seriously. So Prabhupada says in the 67th verse of this chapter, the Lord explicitly forbade the Gita's being spoken to those who are envious of the Lord. So here he's going to explain a little bit. In other words, Bhagavad Gita is for the devotees only. But it so happens that sometimes a devotee of the Lord will hold open class. And in that class, not all the students are expected to be devotees. Why do such persons hold open class? It is explained here that although not everyone is a devotee, still there are many men who are not envious of Krishna. They have faith in him as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If such persons hear from a bona fide devotee about the Lord, the result is that they become at once free from all sinful reactions, and after that attain to the planetary system where all righteous persons are situated. So here it just says if they lack envy, and they have a little bit of faith, it'll work for them. They might not already be devotees and acting in devotion, but that will give this benefit. And he says, he explains further, he says, therefore, simply by hearing Bhagavad Gita, even a person who does not try to be a pure devotee attains the result of righteous activities. And here's where he puts it. Thus, the pure devotee of the Lord, and here in my PowerPoint I've put in bold this last part. I did that myself. This is my addition. But he says, thus a pure devotee of the Lord gives everyone a chance to become free from all sinful reactions and to become a devotee of the Lord. There's everyone a chance to become free from all sinful reactions and to become a devotee of the Lord. We'll talk a little bit about that, how Prabhupada did it and how we do it. Generally, those who are free from sinful, and he says, generally those who are free from sinful reactions, those who are righteous very easily take to Krishna consciousness. Before it said that we didn't have to be free from sins to take up pure devotion. It doesn't hurt though. If you are, no problem. But you don't have to become first to do it. Then he says the word punya karmanam is very significant here. This refers to the performance of great sacrifices like the Ashvamedha Yajna mentioned in the Vedic literature. Those who are righteous in performing devotional service, but who are not pure, can attain the planetary system of the pole star or Dhruvaloka, where Dhruva Maharaj is presiding. So this is what he's saying. This is what they attain, where the pious people go. He's saying they're not necessarily going back to Godhead here, but they're going if they're just hearing, if they're not becoming devotees and acting in pure devotional service. So I just wanted to say a little something because here this is the principle that Prabhupada followed. Thus, a pure devotee of the Lord gives everyone a chance to become free from all sinful reaction and to become a devotee of the Lord. He's not. We're not so selective as that, but it's because we're following the path of Lord Chaitanya. And Prabhupada has mentioned, he says that Krishna demands that we surrender first. But Lord Chaitanya is so kind that he spreads his mercy. And so you do not have to surrender first. You get the mercy first. And so when Prabhupada, even in the very earliest days, he would give Bhagavad Gita, that was part of his thing, he would give Bhagavad Gita lectures in 26 Second Avenue. Second Avenue, yeah. In the first temple. And that was he was talking to everybody who came. He would open class, as he said. But what did they do first? They chanted Hare Krishna. Afterwards, it was very simple. At first, he would cut up an apple afterwards and offer them prasadam. And so what we do usually, if we give classes, there's usually kirtan, there's usually prasadam, then there's the mercy of the devotees. People who are distributing books, they're praying to Krishna for the people. Please let them understand this. Please let them take it. And so, in the mood of Lord Chaitanya, even indiscriminately, you can. If you know somebody is really envious, right? And then you may take some caution. We also have that same prohibition with the chanting of the holy name. That there shouldn't be preaching to the faithless. Because what happens is that you can give people an opportunity to make more offenses. So if you know they're dead set against God, if they're dead set against Krishna in some way, then you may, it's said that the devotee may avoid such people. And because also it will damage them. It can damage them if they make offenses against Krishna or the Bhagavad Gita. But otherwise, if you people selling books on the street, it's presumed that people have some interest, at least they'll take it. They're not so envious. You're kind of weeding people out that way, and you're asking Krishna to give them some mercy. And that Prabhupada's words are in there. He's blessing them if they read Prabhupada's Gita. Prabhupada was so that we understand that the practice of pure bhakti, it started by the mercy of the devotees. And so, nearly so many of us will have no qualifications. We won't fit that bill that Krishna said to be able to take it up. And so that's rectified by the mercy of the devotees, the kind wishes. I wish these people would become a devotee. I wish they can take this and understand that. By the blessings of the devotee, they gain the qualification for hearing Bhagavad Gita. So when Prabhupada was sitting there, 26 Second Avenue and not any other place, or if we even listen to his recordings, read his lectures, his mercy is present in those. He's wanting so badly that anybody will take it and understand it. And so that gives them the qualification that they otherwise didn't have. Prabhupada in another place says that the devotees are more merciful than the Lord because they know the real purpose of the Lord. So he knows that the Lord wants everyone to come back. And so they even are seemingly transcendently more merciful than Krishna, he says, because he's doing their service. So that's why we don't follow that one seemingly to the letter. Because the power of the devotee's mercy and Lord Chaitanya's mercy is predominant there. Okay, so moving on. Now Krishna begins to sum it up. He says, O son of Pritha, O conqueror of wealth, have you heard this with an attentive mind? What is it? Full attention. Eka agrena. And are your ignorance and illusions now dispelled? Agyana and samaha. Is it gone? Pranashtaha, he says, they're gone, destroyed. And Prabhupada says, the Lord was acting as the spiritual master of Arjuna. He gives a nice little insight here. Therefore, it was his duty to inquire from Arjuna whether he understood the whole Bhagavad Gita in its proper perspective. If not, the Lord was ready to re-explain any point or the whole Bhagavad Gita if so required. Then Prabhupada says, actually, anyone who hears Bhagavad Gita from a bona fide spiritual master like Krishna or his representative will find that all his ignorance is dispelled. Bhagavad Gita is not an ordinary book written by a poet or fiction writer. It is spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he said that not only was Arjuna Krishna was expecting Arjuna's ignorance to be dispelled, but ours will be as well. Any person fortunate enough to hear these teachings from Krishna or from his bona fide spiritual representative is sure to become a liberated person and get out of the darkness of ignorance. So we should be happy that we're hearing Bhagavad Gita. Now, moving on to 73, and then Arjuna responds to Krishna's question. Arjuna says, my dear Krishna, O infallible one, my illusion is now gone. I have regained my memory by your mercy. I am now firm and free. What's he say? Twat prasadat, by your mercy. I am now firm and free from doubt, and am prepared to act according to your instructions. I shall, he says, I shall execute your order. And then Prabhupada says in the purport here, he says, the living entity's constitutional position is to be a servitor. He has to serve either the illusory Maya or the Supreme Lord. If he serves the Supreme Lord, he is in his normal condition. But if he prefers to serve the illusory external energy, then certainly he will be in bondage. This is an argument Prabhupada uses quite a bit, because we may not think we don't want to be a servant. Why do we surrender and become a servant? He says, if you don't surrender to Krishna, you're already serving Maya. So there's no question of not being a servant. It's just whether you're, what master do you serve? All right? So make the intelligent choice, he implies. It sometimes says outright and otherwise implies. In illusion, the living entity is serving in this material world. He is bound by his lust and desires. So we're serving lust and desires. Yet he thinks of himself as the master of the world. And he says, moha refers to that which is opposed to knowledge. Actual real knowledge is the understanding that every living being is eternally a servitor of the Lord, but instead of thinking oneself in that position, the living entity thinks that he is not a servant, that he is the master of this material world, for he wants to lord it over the material nature. He says, this illusion can be overcome by the mercy of the Lord or by the mercy of a pure devotee. So here he's mentioning that's how we're able to spread the Krishna consciousness movement. And Prabhupada says that a conditioned soul, illusioned by the external energy of matter, does not know that the Supreme Lord is the master who is full of knowledge and who is the proprietor of everything. Whatever he desires, this is also, listen to this part, is so beautiful. Whatever he desires, this Krishna, he can bestow upon his devotees. He is the friend of everyone, and he is especially inclined to his devotee. Right? This is not tyranny, is it? Doesn't sound like tyranny when we surrender to Krishna. Right? He can bestow upon he is the friend of everyone. He is especially inclined to his devotee. He is the controller of this material nature and of all living entities. He is also the controller of inexhaustible time, and he is full of all opulences and all potencies. The Supreme Personality of Godhead can give even himself to the devotee. So it's not that passage there to me. Removes all your fears of surrendering to somebody, surrendering to Krishna in particular, and it also removes all your fears that maybe it's not sufficient. It shows all of Krishna's power, and his power and his sweetness are both revealed in that passage. So it's a wonderful thing to have Krishna as your master, because he's so sweet, and you are completely secure in that position because he is so powerful. When Arjuna understood that it was Krishna's plan to reduce the unnecessary increase of population, he agreed to fight according to Krishna's desire. He again took up his weapons, his arrows and bow, to fight under the order of the Supreme Personality of God. Prabhupada gives a little extra commentary that's not it's understood in the text. He says, I'm ready to execute your order. He says he picks up his bows and arrows. He threw them aside in the beginning. He put them down. So now he's picking them back up again. He's giving a little bit of added detail there. It's implied by the verse. He says, now I'll execute your order. But he says he reaches down, he picks up his bow and arrow, and he's ready to go. And then 74, and now we have the ending part of Sanjaya, who is narrating the Gita to Dhritarashtra, that we heard in the first chapter. Sanjaya said, thus I have heard the conversation of two great souls. So the conversation between Krishna and Arjuna is finished. Thus I have heard the conversation of two great souls, Krishna and Arjuna. And so wonderful is that message that my hair is standing on end. And Prabhupada says, in the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, Dhritarashtra inquired from his secretary Sanjaya, what happened on the battlefield of Kurukshetra? What did they do? He says, the entire study was related to the heart of Sanjaya by the grace of his spiritual master Vyasa. You could see it actually going on. Thus he explained the theme of the battlefield. So Dhritarashtra was blind, he couldn't participate, and Sanjaya could remotely view it to the grace of Vyasa. He was seeing it and hearing it. The conversation was wonderful because such an important conversation between two great souls had never taken place before and would not take place again. It was an amazing setting, too, right in the middle of the battlefield. It was wonderful because the Supreme Personality of Godhead was speaking about himself and his energies to the living entity Arjuna, a great devotee of the Lord. So the subject matter was wonderful. The circumstances were amazing. And on a battlefield, no less. And if we follow in the footsteps of Arjuna to realize Krishna, then our life will be happy and successful. Sanjaya realized this, and as he began to understand it, he related the conversation to Krishna. Related the conversation to Dhritarashtra. Interesting. If we follow in the footsteps of Arjuna to understand Krishna, then our life will be happy and successful. So Sanjaya understood that's why his hair was standing on it. He realized it applied to him also. It was amazing, what was talked about, how the setting on the battlefield, all those things were wonderful. But he realized what it meant for him, the impact on himself. Like I said, we should be so excited to hear our hair should be standing on end like Sanjaya with excitement when we hear of what's possible for us as small little creatures. We have the ability to see Krishna face to face. So he was understanding that he he just begun? He says he realized it, and as he began to understand it, the hair is going on. He talks to he starts. That's what he's realizing this and making these exclamations here. By the mercy of Vyasa, this is 75. I have heard these most confidential talks directly from the master of all mysticism, Krishna, who is speaking personally to Arjuna. The Yoga Ishvarat, the master of all mysticism. And so Prabhupada takes up that word a little bit in the purport. He says, Vyasa was the spiritual master of Sanjaya, and Sanjaya admits that it was by Vyasa's mercy that he could understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Prabhupada says, this means that one has to understand Krishna not directly, but through the medium of the spiritual master. Interesting. Prabhupada sees a message in that. The spiritual master is the transparent medium, although it is true that the experience is still direct. This is the mystery of the disciplic succession. When the spiritual master is bona fide, then one can hear Bhagavad Gita directly as Krishna heard it.
Gotcha.
Now, what I understand that to mean, and I think he kind of explains that a little bit later also, is that it's not that we're going to hear Krishna speaking the words to Arjuna. But if the message is received in the line of disciplic succession by practitioners, and they remain faithful to that message, then the effect is the same upon you. Prabhupada uses that word so many times, non-different, which is ordinarily it's a strange word because we usually it would just be the same, but there is some difference, but not in the effect. So the holy name is non-different from Krishna. Well, that's the holy name, So the Krishna is there, present fully, but it's the name. So it's non-different. So in the same way here, if we hear from someone like Srila Prabhupada, and who's present in our contemporary times, he can present the message in a way that's even more relevant to us. That's why his purports, that's why there's purports. You see, he could just have translated the Bhagavad Gita, but if we heard Krishna speaking like he did to Arjuna, we would have that. We'd have his words, all right? But how we understand it and apply it is given through Prabhupada's commentary and purports, and so in that way, it has the same effect. It's even better for us in that way. Mm-hmm. So in that way, it's just like it has this. It has those same effects. You become free from illusion. You go back to Krishna. There's no difference. The same effect can be recreated. It's also theoretically possible that it could be. You could hear the actual words, but that was not what usually happens. Then Prabhupada says, addressing the master of all mystics, he says, There are many mystics and yogis all over the world, but Krishna is the master of all yoga systems. Krishna's instruction is explicitly stated in the Bhagavad Gita, surrender unto Krishna. Early on, Krishna said, everyone follows my path in all respects. Yeah. And so here again, Prabhupada is coming to the point where that says that you don't have to worry about all these other systems. They're not separate from Krishna. He's also in charge of those. And he says, surrender to me. That's his recommendation. So he's the one, he's developed all these other systems. He's in charge of them. And he says, but the one you should do is this. This is the best one. He knows what. So one who does so is the topmost yogi. This is confirmed in the last verse of the 6th chapter, Yogi Namapi Sarvesham. So again, we're coming back to that central point of the Gita. Prabhupada says, in Bhagavad Gita, all the yoga systems, karma yoga, jnana yoga, and bhakti yoga are explained. Krishna is the master of all such mysticism. Yeah, so. Then he says, one who directly hears Krishna can understand this confidential knowledge. If one does not come to the disciplic succession, he cannot hear Krishna. Therefore, his knowledge is always imperfect, at least as far as understanding Bhagavad Gita is concerned. So again, he's emphasizing hearing from the proper source. Then 76, again, this is Sanjaya speaking, O king, as I repeatedly recall this wondrous and holy dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna, Adbhutam, and Punyam, pious and wonderful. Between Krishna and Arjuna, I take pleasure, Krishyami, I'm taking pleasure, being thrilled at every moment. Oh, there's a beautiful line in this purport. A beautiful line in this purport. First, though, it says, it's also beautiful, but there's one that really hit me. The understanding of Bhagavad Gita is so transcendental that anyone who becomes conversant with the topics of Arjuna and Krishna becomes righteous and cannot forget such talks. He says that was the effect on Sanjaya. Right? He says, I repeatedly recall this wondrous and holy dialogue. So that if you do that, you can't forget it, he says. They become righteous and can't forget such talks. It should be captivating our minds. This is the transcendental position of spiritual life. In other words, one who hears the Gita from the right source, directly from Krishna, attains full Krishna consciousness. But we should be captivated by this information in the Gita. It shouldn't just go in one ear and out the other. It should stick. And now, he says, because he was, Sanjaya was talking about being thrilled. The result of Krishna consciousness is that one becomes increasingly enlightened and he enjoys life with a thrill, not only for some time, but at every moment. I think we should frame that and hang that up everywhere. Because we generally don't do that, but we should be. If we really understood what we're doing and understood our good fortune, it would be like that. Always he enjoys life with a thrill, not only for some time, but at every moment. I'm definitely, actually, I'm going to put that up on my wall. I think I need to see that. And in 77, O king, as I remember the wonderful form of Krishna, I am struck with wonder more and more, and I rejoice again and again. And it says, Prabhupada says, it appears that Sanjaya also, by the grace of Vyasa, could see the universal form Krishna exhibited to Arjuna. That's when he talked about the wonderful form. That's what he's talking about, Prabhupada says. The, the Rupam Adbhutam, wonderful form. So he was talking about that, the universal form in the 11th chapter. It is of course said that Lord Krishna had never exhibited such a form before. It was exhibited to Arjuna only, yet some great devotees could also see the universal form of Krishna when it was shown to Arjuna, and Vyasa was one of them. He is one of the great devotees of the Lord, and he is considered to be a powerful incarnation of Krishna. Vyasa disclosed this to his disciple, Sanjaya, who remembered that the wonderful form of Krishna exhibited to Arjuna and enjoyed it repeatedly. So that's what he was talking about, it was the universal form. Now the last verse, this is it. Wherever there is Krishna, the master of all mystics, and wherever there is Arjuna, the supreme archer, there will also certainly be opulence, victory, this is Shri, Vijaya, exceptional power, Bhuti, morality, extraordinary power and morality, victory, extraordinary power, and that's Vijaya's victory, Bhuti, exceptional power, niti, morality. So there will be opulence, victory, extraordinary power, and morality. That is my opinion. This is Sanjaya's opinion. And Prabhupada says, the Bhagavad Gita began with an inquiry of Dhritarashtra's. He was hopeful of the victory of his sons, assisted by great warriors like Bhishma, Drona, and Karna. Remember, this is just the Bhagavad Gita spoken still before the battle has taken place. He was hopeful that the victory would be on his side. But after describing the scene on the battlefield, Sanjaya told the king, "You are thinking of victory, but my opinion is that where Krishna and Arjuna are present, there will be all good fortune." He directly confirmed that Dhritarashtra could not expect victory for his side. He's giving them the message there. And then Prabhupada says, the battle was to decide who would rule the world, and Sanjaya predicted that the power would be transferred to Yudhisthira. It is also predicted here that Yudhisthira, after gaining victory in this battle, would flourish more and more because not only was he righteous and pious, but he was also a strict moralist. It says of morality, wherever Krishna and Arjuna are. He never spoke a lie during his life. So he says he says he's foreshadowing the rule of Yudhisthira there. There'll be victory, means that there'll be defeat, power and victory. That'll mean the defeat for Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana on that side, and afterwards there'll be this morality under the reign of Yudhisthira. And Prabhupada says, the instructions of Bhagavad Gita constitute the supreme process of religion and morality. All other process may be purifying and may lead to this process, but the last instruction of Gita is the last word in all morality and religion, surrender unto Krishna. This is the verdict of the 18th chapter. The path of regulative principles according to the orders of social life and according to the different courses of religion may be a confidential path of knowledge. But although the rituals of religion are confidential, meditation and cultivation of knowledge are still more confidential, and surrender unto Krishna in devotional service in full Krishna consciousness is the most confidential instruction. So again, we're dealing with the essence here. That is the essence of the 18th chapter, Prabhupada says. This is his final purport here, so he's trying to make sure we don't miss anything. Although superficially the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the living entity, material nature, and time appear to be different. Oh, this is beautiful here. Nothing is different from the Supreme. They're all his energies. But the Supreme is always different from everything. Yeah, right? So, yeah. Isha Upanishad, like that. Supreme Personality says, nothing is different from the Supreme, but the Supreme is always different from everything. Lord Chaitanya's philosophy is that of inconceivable oneness and difference. This system of philosophy constitutes perfect knowledge of the absolute truth. So, everything is Krishna's energy. So there only is Krishna in his extended potencies, but then he is the source of all the other ones, so he's unique. So he's different from everything. And it says in Bhagavad Gita, 5 principal subject matters have been discussed: the Supreme Personality of Godhead, material nature, the living entities, eternal time, and all kinds of activities. All is dependent on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. And then the very last, this is the last we'll hear of Bhagavad Gita. In other words, the living entity is situated between the two energies of the Lord. And because he belongs to the superior energy of the Lord, he has a particle of independence. By proper use of that independence, he comes under the direct order of Krishna. Thus he attains his normal condition and the pleasure-giving potency. We should follow Arjuna and follow Krishna's order, and that's what we get.